And here's the contents of that box that I just got from the Netherlands. This is the Easy Steer kit for the XK120. And just want to go through some of the components. This is obviously the main power unit here. That is the output shaft, and that is the output shaft cover. And that there is the computer. These power steering kits are found on a number of modern cars. In fact, this one is too. This unit is from some modern car. And Easy Steer has done all these adaptations to make it work easily in an XK120. I thought of doing all of these things myself. You can buy just this unit right here off of eBay for a couple $100 from some car. There's a variety to choose from. However, it's not such an easy conversion as just cutting this thing and putting it in a 120, and the reason for that is the wiring goes through the steering column. You can see they've done quite a lot of engineering and construction to get this wiring to go through an adjustable column of their own construction, through a tube of their own constructions, contacts for the horn and trafficators of their own construction, an adapter of their own construction. This threads on. This here is really the only part they didn't make themselves, from what I can see in the computer. All of these things are custom made, and they have splines to make. This fits onto the output shaft here. So basically speaking, what happens is you cut your shaft and weld it on here. That's basically speaking what you do. And then everything else is just exactly like Jaguar. This thing sits under the dashboard, and that cover covers your welding job and clamps onto the original shaft. It's very clever if it all works. Anyway, this should be an interesting project and worthwhile, hopefully. Stay tuned. Alright, I'm well into the installation now, and I've done the most difficult part, which is cutting the steering column. So I had to make two cuts, one to the outer column right here, and then the actual part that turns the inner column. And the stator tube, which was going all the way through here for the electrics, I pushed all the way out. I didn't cut it like they suggested, because I figure why cut a good stator tube? And it was a little tricky to get out, but I was able to kind of wiggle it out through the brake vent here in the front. And it's about 4 or 5 feet long. There it is. I figure I'll put it on eBay or something. Someone can use it one day. So the other cut that I had to make is under the dashboard. I don't know how well you're going to be able to see this, but it's sort of like the sheet metal underneath the dashboard in order to get the electric motor up there. Hopefully I won't have to cut this piece. It's going to be very close, but hopefully I won't have to do that. So I've gone ahead and installed the output shafts. So first the tube that slides over the original outer tube of the steering column, which is threaded on the end, and then the solid shaft, which actually slides into the hollow shaft of the original steering column. And this here is where it's eventually going to be welded once everything has been set up, and the output flange is threaded as internal threads, and that is installed before the motor. So now I've got to see if the motor will fit inside without additional cutting. In order to install the motor in the car, you have to remove the upper part of the steering column. And there are some interesting details here. You can see the contacts for the wiring for the trafficator and the horn. So those rotate inside the outer column. And let me get some light on that. And they make contact with those contacts in there. spring contacts. And at the other end of this outer column is a nice greased roller bearing. So that should be give some good action. Another thing that I didn't show before is the variable adjuster. This apparently goes into the speedometer cable. I don't see where else it would go. There's no instructions about it, but that just goes at the back of the speedometer. And as this goes faster, it reduces the help, the assist with this on the steering motor. You can see a battery here. I've already put this all together and tested it on my bench because I didn't want any surprises, and it does work very well. It's got a lot of torque. And here, that's the original column, which I've never seen before out of the car. It's got this taper, and then it becomes bigger and hollow. So this is the part that I cut off. Okay, the motor and upper column are in. After quite a struggle, I didn't realize how much you had to actually cut out. I did have to cut out this bulkhead right here, and I also had to cut some out over here. Even then, it was very difficult to get this in. Just barely fit. But once it's in there, it's quite happy. So you do have to cut out a number of spots. And the only way I could get it in was by putting the snout in first and then rotating the motor up in. That's why I had to cut this out. So a little bit unfortunate with all the cutting, but necessary. One thing I was concerned about is how far the new column would protrude from the dashboard. So I measured the old column before I took it out, which was 9.5 inches. And the new one is luckily 8.5 inches. So they cut an inch off the column, which is a completely unnecessary inch. For anyone who's ever driven an XK120, the adjustable column is pretty much always, as far away from you as possible. So there was no need to have this extra inch. So I thought that was a pretty smart move on their part. Alright, I've just welded the output shaft to the original shaft here in the engine bay. And you can see it's all protected with fiberglass mat. One thing I would mention is that this does need to be a very good weld because your steering depends on it. So if you're unsure of your capabilities or you don't have a 220 welder of sufficient amperage, I wouldn't do this. I would recommend having someone else do it, or in addition to the weld, drill a hole right through everything. This is a solid shaft, and then put a pin in it or something like that. But I'd used a 200 amp Miller-Matic welder, which I've been using for years, and I am a pretty good welder. So yeah, that's an important weld, even though it is in shear, so it's strong. Then I've slid the outer shaft over what I just welded, and I'm threading it into the flange on the motor. And you'll notice I have absolutely slathered these big threads with Never Seize, because big threads definitely have a way of seizing up over time. And this is steel, so yeah, slather them up. Okay, so the guy got in trouble for fishing because it's private property. He continues to fish.